Oh yeah, it's gonna have to happen here soon. Good. He's back from the slope with the homeschool group, class, organization, whatever it is. Had an across the bay outing, so they went somewhere on the other side of Kachemak Bay. So I don't know if the Jaworskis are going to be back. It's going to be, they're coming back this morning, so they don't know if they're going to make it or not. But the Jaworskis, the Cannons, and somebody else too. Yeah, they're all over there. So I don't know if we'll see him.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering.
So he's in town. He is in town. It's just.
I was wondering if I text him and wondering if he was going to be able to teach next week the final chapter of Samuel.
Well, he's preaching next week, so I'm hoping he'd be here, but he may not want to do both.
Right. He didn't tell me that. He just didn't answer, so I need to find somebody for next week. Maybe Don will be.
Maybe, yeah. All right. Good morning, folks. It's a little after 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started with class. If you want to start finding your places. We'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 23, next to the last chapter of 2 Samuel. But before we get started on that, does anybody have any? Oh, I don't know if I can take announcements. I don't have room to write them on the back of the bulletin. It's so full already. Anyway, any announcements, prayer requests, things of note before we get started? Like I said, we've got a lot of stuff coming up. There's, if you get a bulletin, be sure to check the back cover because it did not even come close to all fitting inside. So, I know some people getting home. Some of our number are on a, I guess I'd call it an expedition across the bay. And they're not sure if they're going to be here this morning or not. That would include the Jaworskis and the Cannons and some of the other homeschoolers. But they might. I don't know for sure. All right, let's open in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have to gather here at this time and to study your word. We ask that you would help us to gain a deeper knowledge of it, and through learning the history of your people, that we would gain an understanding of your will. We thank you for your word that is so readily available to us. And so many tools to study it and gain an understanding of it. We ask that you would be with us, open our our minds and give us wisdom in using the resources available to us to gain a deeper understanding. We thank you for the blessings we have here at this congregation. Be with those of our number that are not able to be with us, those that are traveling, those dealing with illnesses. Be with our brothers and sisters elsewhere. Help them to do well. Help your church around the world, particularly in places where they have more difficulties than we do. Help us not to become complacent in how easy we have it here. Help us to remain loyal and true to you even through those times. We thank you most of all for sending your son Jesus and the blessings we have because of him. It's in his name that we pray. Amen. So this chapter, chapter 23 of 2 Samuel, is, like I said, it's next to the last chapter in this book. It has two parts. The first 7 verses is a psalm made by David. And then the remaining section, the bulk of the chapter, is just a list of his 30 mighty men, as they were called, even though there's more than 30 of them. That same list is also given in 1 Chronicles chapter 11 and is longer and includes even more people. So there's some things, and we'll discuss that as we get to it. But for starters, we'll look at the first 7 verses. Would somebody like to read the first 7 verses of this chapter? Okay.
Now these are the last words of David. The oracle of David, the son of Jesse, the oracle of the man who was raised on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord speaks by me. His word is on my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken. The rock of Israel has said to me, when one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light, like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning, like rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. For does not my house stand so with God, where he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure? For will he not cause to prosper all my hope and my desire? But worthless men are like thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be taken with the hand. But the man who touches them arms himself with iron and the shaft of his spear, and they are utterly consumed with fire.
All right. So comparing this psalm to the last chapter, last week the chapter that we had was a psalm. It's fairly identical to one of the psalms. I want to say chapter 19, but I don't remember for sure. 18, okay. And there was some discussion, and in looking at this, I found also among scholars some of the same discussion that we had, that this was the preceding chapter was a psalm that David had sang many times in his life, and because it says that he sang it when he was delivered out of the hand of Saul, and they believe that's why it ended up in the book of Psalms with very little changes, maybe a few, because David somewhat formatted it for worship as opposed to being a personal song. May change some of the very minor changes. You read through it, it's very identical. This psalm in this chapter is not recorded anywhere else. It didn't make it into the book of Psalms. If once we get into the book of Kings, we will find David's last words to Solomon, his son that was going to succeed him on the throne. So these may be something like the last public words of David, because it says they are the last words of David, but that might be one explanation to this being given here. What else was I going to say? The wording of this indicates that it's inspired. Apparently, these the words of David. The way this is written in Hebrew is a way that it has only been written 4 times, all speaking about inspired things. Balaam, when he spoke what God told him to speak, when he was hired to curse the children of Israel, it was worded this way, and somewhere in Proverbs, it's also worded this way, in a total of 4 times. But if there were any question about that in the Hebrew wouldn't get translated in English in the wording of it, we can get to verse 2, and we can see he says, "The Spirit of the Lord spoke by me, and his word was in my tongue." So David is stating here, this is inspired saying. Jewish scholars to this day cite this as a prophecy regarding the reign of his children that would continue. In it, we see David, as I said at the beginning, he credits the Lord that the Spirit of the Lord spoke by me in verse 2, and his word was in my tongue. And then he goes on to say, "The God of Israel said, and the rock of Israel spoke to me, he that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God." So he's speaking here about the rulers, which would be himself. And he said, "And he shall be as the light of the morning, when the sun riseth, even a morning without clouds, as tender grass springeth out of the earth by clear shining after rain." And in verse 5, he goes on to admit that his household has not met those standards. It says, "Although my house be not so with God, yet he hath made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and sure. This is all my salvation and all my desire, although he make it not to grow." So he's stating that even though he has fallen short of the marks of what a king and a ruler should be, we've had numerous discussions about this. No man is going to meet God's standards. David, however, acknowledged that he had fallen short, but also says he has this covenant from God. God promised him that if they stayed faithful, his seed would remain on the throne, and we're going to be studying that here in a couple of weeks when Solomon takes over. There are difficulties. Solomon's brother Adonijah, challenges the throne, ends up being another one of David's children killed in political revolt. So we do see these shortcomings, but he's stating that God hath made a covenant with him, and despite David's shortcomings, he trusts in what God has to say. But he says, "But the sons of Belial, which shall be all of them as thorns." Now, King James says sons of Belial, and we've seen that in numerous places in King James. And apparently I ran across one scholar who was saying, even though it's correct oftentimes to translate it as Belial, which we know means worthlessness or worthless person, this person was saying in this case is not the same word that is translated elsewhere as Belial. It literally is worthlessness. So I know the ESV and several other versions also say worthlessness. What Danny read said worthlessness, and apparently that is quite accurate. "The sons of worthlessness shall be as the thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man that shall touch them must be fenced with iron, and the staff of a spear, that they shall be utterly burnt with fire in the same place." So that's the final. It says the last words of David. Like I said, it may mean his last public words, speaking about his house and God's promise. Does anybody have any thoughts on that before we move on to the mighty men? All right. Well, the mighty men. Like I said, this list is also in 1 Chronicles 11. starting in verse 10. There, some of these names are different, and yet scholars have been able to like cross-check, and some of them it's just different spellings. But there's more names given in Chronicles. So even though these 30 men, it says at the end, are 37 in all here, there's even more listed later. Some explanations scholars have given is these were the original 30, and over time we know some of these people died. In fact, some of the ones we'll go through, we've already read very early in this book. Some of them were killed in battle. Others think this was given at the end. They don't know why there's the discrepancies. There's not a clear agreement on that. Also, this text is one that there's been some disagreement between various ancient manuscripts on. So even in translating this, it's been one of those texts that's difficult to translate, and so that's part of why there's numerous spelling differences between here and Chronicles, if a person were to compare the list. But nonetheless, there's some of these people are just on this list, and they're listed in Chronicles, and we don't really know anything about them. Others of these people, we know a lot of stories about them, and they were fantastic people. It gives some stories here. So I just kind of went through it line by line and found what I could about each one of these people. So in verse 8 it says, "These be the names of the mighty men whom David had. The Tachomite that sat in the seat, chief among the captains. The same was Adino the Enzite. He lifted up his spear against 800, whom he slew at one time." Adino is also referred to as Joshabim in Chronicles. So he's one of the names that it seems he had multiple names. Not even so much that it was a spelling difference. It just may be like how Peter was also called Cephas. He may have just gone by a couple different names. It says here he lifted up his spear against 800, whom he slew at one time. In Chronicles it says 300. Some people feel like the difference may be that he personally killed 300, and there were 800 killed in that particular battle. We don't know, but that has been given as one explanation. But he killed either 300 or 800 with his spear. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the three mighty men with David when they defied the Philistines that were there gathered together in battle, and the men of Israel were gone away. He arose and smote the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clave to the sword. And the Lord wrought a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to spoil. So we see there that he fought until his hand was cramped to the sword. It clave to the sword. He couldn't even let it go. And the people came back only to have to collect the spoils. And next it says, after him was Shema, the son of Eleka the Herodite. And the Philistines were gathered together into a troop, and there was a piece of ground full of lentils, and the people fled from the Philistines. But he stood in the midst of the ground and defended it, and slew the Philistines, and the Lord wrought a great victory. It is possible that this is the same battle mentioned with Eleazar, the one listed before him. If you go to Chronicles 11, when it gives that list, it tells a slightly different version. It lists Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, was one of the three mighties, and he was with David at Pas Dammim. And there the Philistines were gathered together to battle, and there was a parcel full of barley, and the people fled from the Philistines. And they set themselves in the midst of that parcel and delivered it and slew the Philistines, and the Lord saved them by a great deliverance. A lot of people think because of the similarities that was possibly the same battle, and it credits it to Eleazar, the second of the three, instead of this one. It's also possible that they're two distinct events. We don't know. After that, in verse 13, it says, "And 3 of the 30 chief went down and came to David at the harvest time under the cave of Adullam, and the troop of the Philistines pitched in the valley of Rephaim." Now, there's some disagreement on this. It says 3 of the 30, and to me that indicates that the 30 that are about to be named, 3 of them did the deed that we're about to read about, the great feat. But there is some disagreement. Was this the 3 that we just read about, or is this 3 of the 30? And it seems from the scripture that it's 3 of the 30, and we'll get into some of that as we get farther. But I will note that there is some disagreements as to that, as to 3 of the 30. But anyway, in verse 13 it says, "And 3 of the 30 chief went down and came to David in the harvest time under the cave of Adullam, and the troop of the Philistines pitched in the valley of Rephaim. And David was then in a hold, and the garrison of the Philistines was in Bethlehem. And David longed and said, Oh, that one would give me a drink of the water of the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate. And the 3 mighty men brake through the host of the Philistines and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink thereof, but poured it out unto the Lord. And he said, Be it far from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is not this the blood of the men that went in jeopardy of their lives? Therefore he would not drink it. And these things did these 3 mighty men." So David poured this out unto the Lord. And the wording there would be the same as what you would describe as a drink offering. So it wasn't just that he decided, no, I'm not going to drink this water. He literally, like it says, poured it out unto the Lord as a drink offering. These men risked their lives for it. This is very important. I'm not even worthy to drink that. Of course, that tale has led to lots of speculation. What did they think after he just poured the water out? I think since he poured it out onto the Lord and it's worded that way, I think that everybody would, of a Jewish background, would understand that, it being a drink offering. But yeah, we have no way of knowing, but lots of discussion about that. It's like, and he just poured it out on the ground. In verse 18, it mentions Abishai, the brother of Joab. It says, Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief among 3. And he lifted up his spear against 300 and slew them, and had a name among the 3. Was he not most honorable of 3? Therefore he was their captain. Howbeit he attained not unto the first 3. So the fact that it says he didn't obtain to the first 3, most scholars believe that is referencing the first 3 individuals, David's top 3 guys. But it says that he was most honorable of the 3, and that leads most scholars to believe, and I think this makes sense, that he was most honorable of the 3 that broke through and got that water for Bethlehem. And he is oftentimes credited with being one of those 3. He was Joab's brother. He was the one who went with David and stole Saul's water bottle. And we read that in 1 Samuel 26, starting in verse 6. I'm not going to go there for time's sake, but I think we remember that. That's when David was in the mountains and Saul pitched and everybody was sound asleep, and they walked in there. And in fact, Abishai was like, let me kill him. And David restrained him, and they stole Saul's spear and Saul's water bottle. And then they got up on the mountain and called to Saul. That was Abishai that was with him. And he was mentioned also several times during Absalom's revolt on David's side. But yeah. Some scholars believe he may have died by the time that King Solomon was on the throne, as he is never mentioned in those tales, even though his brother and some of these other mighty men were mentioned. That's just speculation, but that's what some scholars believe. It's like, well, either he was old enough as to not be involved and basically be retired, or he had passed away by that time, because since all the other people he was affiliated with were involved in those tales later on. Next is Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts. He slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in a time of snow. And he slew an Egyptian, a goodly man, and the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, and he went down to him with a staff and plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and slew him with his own spear. Now, it doesn't give a size for that Egyptian, just that he was a goodly man, but in Chronicles, it gives so many cubits, and he was apparently a 7-foot tall Egyptian with a spear like a weaver's beam, the same way they described Goliath's spear. And he plucked it out of his hand and slew him. And these things did Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and had a name among 3 mighty men. And since it says he has a name among the 3 mighty men, it is believed that he is the second of the 3 that went and got the water from Bethlehem. Because he's not listed among those first 3, but when it says he has the name of the 3 mighty men, scholars believe that's what he's referring to, just like Abishai, that he was the second of those 3. Interestingly enough, we have no clue who the third one of those 3 that went and got that water might be. So Asahel, another brother of Joab, was one of the 30. We had read of his death early in this book in 2 Samuel chapter 2. He was killed by Abner. He was chasing after Abner, and Abner told him to stop chasing him. And it mentions how fast he was, like he was really fleet of foot. And when he would not cease pursuing Abner, Abner turned around and ran him through with a spear. And of course, that was one of the reasons why Joab later murdered Abner. And of course, that would be one of the people that Joab murdered that King David will somewhat call him out on, and will tell Solomon not to let him live for this. Next, Elhanan, son of Dodo. There is a mention of an Elhanan in chapter 21 who killed Goliath's brother, but that says it was Elhanan, the son of Jair, and this is Elhanan, the son of Dodo. So unless there is some mistake there and in who his father was, there is no other mention of this person. Shammah, the Herodite. It's not clear if this is the same Shammah listed as one of the 3 at the beginning, or another Herodite with the same name. There are several Herodites, listed among these men, and some repeat names here. So it's just not real clear. Eleka the Herodite, I didn't find any other mention of him other than in the list of the 30 men. Helez the Palatite is mentioned as commanding 24,000 troops 1 month a year in 1 Chronicles 27. Several of these people, in addition to being in the list of the 30 mighty men in 1 Chronicles 11, later on in 1 Chronicles 27, it is listing, who David had set up over various things. And there was captains set up over 24,000 1 month of each year. And there was one over the first month and one over the second month and so forth. And this guy was in command of the 24,000 troops 1 month a year. In First Chronicles 27:10, it was the 7th month that he was in charge of the troops. The next person given, Ira, the son of Akesh, he was the commander of the same troop on the 6th month out of the year. Abiezer the Anthonite, he was the captain in the 9th month. Mabuna is either listed by a different name in Chronicles or omitted. I could find no other mention of that particular name, but he is one that some of the scholars think is just listed by a completely different name in Chronicles. Zalman, also the same thing. I did not find him mentioned anywhere else. I did find a location named Zalman. If you go to biblical atlases, there is a wooded area that is named Zalman. So either this man was possibly named for that area or this area was named after him. But you can find that on some, Bible atlases. Mahari, the Netophaite, he was also a commander of those 24,000 on the 10th month. Helab, the son of Benan, was commander of during the 12th month of those 24,000. Ittai, the son of Rabai out of Gibeah, of the children of Benjamin. I have nothing else on him. There is another person with the same name, but it's Ittai the Gittite, and so it doesn't appear to be the same person. And so I have no other information on this guy. Benai, the Parathonite, he was also a commander of the 24,000 in the 11th month. Hiddai, of the brooks of Gash. It is spelled Hurai instead of Hiddai, with the D's replaced with R's in Chronicles. And so he's in the list there, just spelled differently. Abelon, the Abathite, is also spelled differently in Chronicles. Asmavet, the Barhumamite, he is listed as treasurer in 1 Chronicles 27:25. It says, and over the king's treasure was Asmeth, the son of Adel, and over the storehouses in the fields, in the cities, and in the villages, and in the castles. So that was an additional position he held, was that he became in charge of the treasure. So he was treasurer under King David. Eliba is listed here and also in Chronicles. That's all I found on him. And the next bit gets a little interesting. It says, of the sons of Jashan, Jonathan. Or according to 1 Chronicles, it says the sons of Shag. And then it says Shaman the Herodite. Shema the Herodite, which we've seen that name already listed. Yeah, it was the one that I said in verse 25. It says it has his name listed, and he's also listed as one of the 3 mighty men. Now, one of the explanations for this is this is one of the areas where the ancient manuscripts are a little bit hard to read. Some people believe that the spacing was put in the wrong place, and this of the sons of Jashan, Jonathan, that it should be Eliba the Shalbanite, the son of Jashan, and Jonathan, the son of Shema the Herite, which would explain why he's listed multiple times, and that his son may have also been Jonathan, another one of the 30 mighty men. We don't know that, but that's what some ancient languages experts, people that know far more about it than me, and there are some conflicts between the ancient manuscripts, think is one possible explanation, which would also explain why Shema the Herodite is mentioned multiple times, is that here in verse 33, when he's mentioned, it's listing that Jonathan was possibly his son. And if so, this guy has the unique position of being listed as one of the three. He also is listed as one of the 30 in verse 25. And it's quite possible here in verses 32 and 33 that it's referencing that his son may have also been one of the 30. Though that is not extremely clear. Either that or there were a lot of people named Shema, and they were Herodites. Aham, the son of Sherer the Herodite. So we do see a lot of Herodites, people from that area in David's troops. So it's possible there were just a lot of them with the same name. I wouldn't rule either out. Eliphat, the son of Abishai, the son of Machite. I didn't have anything else on him. Eliam, the son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite. I think we discussed this when we were studying David and Bathsheba, but this was the father of Bathsheba. And his father Ahithophel was a counselor to David and then to Absalom. He was the one that it was stated that his counsel was like seeking the oracles of God. Apparently he was just incredibly good. And of course we read that Ahithophel, once Absalom rejected his advice, went back to Gilonite, the town that he was from, put his things in order, and hanged himself. So he was the grandfather of Bathsheba and the father of Elam, which was one of David's 30 mighty men, who was the father of Bathsheba. And of course, as we'll see as we get to the end, the very last mighty man named was Uriah the Hittite, which was the husband of Bathsheba. So, and again, we mentioned this back when we were studying that. It was like there were all kinds of David's closest associates that were Bathsheba's grandfather was his counselor. Bathsheba's father was one of his mighty men. Bathsheba's husband was one of his mighty men. He wasn't just somebody that he had no connections to whatsoever. He had multiple connections to these people. So, I keep losing my place. Hezriah, the Carmelite. It's spelled Hezro in Chronicles, but otherwise that was the only thing I could note of that. Pariah. It is also spelled differently in Chronicles. They replaced the P with an N, so it's Nariah instead of Pariah. Igal, the son of Nathan of Zobah, is only mentioned here. And Bani, the Gadite. Bani, as a Gadite, is only mentioned here, but there are numerous people with this name, some of which could be this person, but I wasn't able to verify it. It was apparently a relatively common name. But there's no other references to Bani, the Gadite. So it's possible that there are stories about him, but I could not, pin it down to him. Zelek the Ammonite. I found nothing else really about him. There were a lot of scholars pointing out that he's an Ammonite. He wasn't actually a Jew, and there were others listed among this that were not Jews. That King David, had followers that were either converts to Judaism from other countries or just followed David. And we had seen that, I think going through these last few books, that David had a lot of people that from a wide variety of backgrounds that followed him. But that's the only thing I can find noteworthy on him. Nariah the Beerothite, armor bearer to Joab, the son of Zeruiah. 2 Samuel 18:15 references that Joab had 10 armor bearers. It says, and the 10 young men that bear Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and slew him. So there is some discussion among scholars as to whether this guy is one of those 10 armor bearers. Some scholars want to credit that he is the captain of the 10, but we really don't know. We just know that he is an armor bearer to Joab. During the time of Absalom's revolt, Joab is mentioned as having 10 armor bearers. So, also, his name, Nariah, it either means snore, like he snores, or snorter, like he snorts, or it means nostrils hot with anger. So there's something in connection with his name about his nose. So just the only other thing interesting about him is just his whole name. So whether that was his given name or whether he actually just acquired that name in life is one of those things, since all the references seem to be about that. So that was the fun bit there. Ira the Ithrite. He's also listed in First Chronicles, and that's all we know about him. So there were a couple different people named Ira. Gareb, another Ithrite. He's also listed in Chronicles. There's no other mention of them. And Uriah the Hittite. We had mention of Uriah. He's Bathsheba's husband, and King David put him into a position to be killed. And then it says 37 in all, which the fascinating part of that is when you read it through, it's only 36 names. So I don't know why it says 37 in all. There is significant discussion as to whether 37 in all included Joab, and that Joab's name was later removed from the list. That's speculation, but you can't read all these names and it says 37 in all, and it's like, wait a minute. In fact, I did it the first time, I only came up with 35, but either there's and then I found the one I missed, but there's some confusion there, and it wasn't just me, because I found scholars that pointed this out too. So it's like, okay, no, it says 37 in all, but I only counted 36, and I had to count twice. I kept coming up with 35, and then I finally figured out that I was missing things. So either there's some confusion about some of these people that, like Shema the Herodite, that's listed multiple times, or some people speculate that Joab should have been on this list and was removed, but that's simply speculation. There obviously are more people listed in First Chronicles, but it doesn't say 37 in all. So I don't have an answer for that, Ben. That's another possibility. That was never mentioned. It could be that David was. That could make 37. Yeah, that would. So And that would also possibly go with the theory that these were the original 37 mighty men in Chronicles, because we saw Asahel, the brother of Joab, he died really early, and the listing in Chronicles may have been everybody that was ever a mighty man, and this might have possibly been the original mighty men. So, any other thoughts, comments, or questions on this chapter? All right. Well, I think that'll do. We're about 10 minutes out, so just enough time to get ready, and we'll prepare for worship.